Queensland Senator Senator Stoker did a brilliant job grilling higher education bureaucrats about the free speech issues raised by the violent protest against Bettina Arndt at Sydney University. She was appearing before the Education and Employment Committee in Senate estimates Thursday, October 25. Senator Stoker established that the body responsible for ensuring universities comply with free speech regulations is TEXA, the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency. Here she is, questioning the chairman of TEXA, Professor Nicholas Saunders.
I'd like to raise one example that's cropped up lately. It gives me some concern about freedom of speech and intellectual inquiry on campus. On the 11th of September, psychologist Bettina Arndt attended Sydney University's campus to give a lecture. Are you aware that that event happened on the 11th of September? Have you read press reports about it?
I am.
And so are you and the other members of TEXA aware that while the attendees who wanted to go to hear her speak were well behaved, there were many students who found the presence of Ms. Arndt, Dr. Arndt, so objectionable, presumably without hearing it because they stopped the talk from happening, and they were so violent and abusive and intimidating that security had to call in the riot squad?
I am, yes.
And is TEXA aware that the organisers of the event were billed by the university for the cost of being kept safe from violent protesters restricting their ability to hear ideas on campus?
I have read the media reports, yes.
Then you may also be aware that those protesting students breached safety requirements, blocked entry, injured people who were trying to attend the speech, and some of them had coffee thrown on them. They suffered quite significant intimidation. Has TEXA raised with the University of Sydney, as a breach of this important principle of free intellectual inquiry and a condition of them having the right to trade as a university, that intellectual freedom is being inhibited on campus by their decision to bill non-violent students who want to attend and listen to ideas, billing them to be kept safe from students who find ideas objectionable?
I'm unable to answer that question. I have to take that on notice simply because I do not know whether there has been any correspondence or communication between the officers of TEXA and the University of Sydney about this matter. If I could say, Senator, without downplaying the importance of the matter that you're raising, I mean, we do not have a crisis on our hands. The issue of free speech has been, and its importance on campus, and student reactions to particular issues or speakers has been going on for decades. This is an issue that has an international dimension. It's being debated at the moment, as you know, probably most vigorously in the United States, but right around the world. So it would be wrong to consider, I think, that we have now this sort of rabid outbreak of hampering freedom of speech on campus. But the behaviour of those individuals that interrupted Ms. Arndt's or Dr. Arndt's presentation at the University of Sydney was inappropriate. It would have broken the university's code of conduct.
It most certainly did.
And you know, that in its own right needs to be assessed soberly, but at the same time, and if breaches of the codes of conduct and the like have occurred, then appropriate action obviously needs to be taken.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. The university has not enforced its code of conduct, which required that all students of the university behave in a way that, and I'm paraphrasing now, that is respectful of others, and it's freedom of speech, Senator Pratt.
You missed the point entirely.
You're missing it entirely.
Yes,
no,
I'm not missing the point. Let's try and stay on track.
That code of conduct requires students to ensure that they don't act in a manner that unnecessarily or unreasonably impedes the ability of students, employees and others to access the resources, the venues of the university.
Yep.
The Code of Conduct is not being enforced. Do I have from you, Professor, an indication that you will follow up on the enforcement of that Code of Conduct, important as it is to...
You have my undertaking that I will follow up with the University of Sydney.
Thank you, Professor.
Senator Stoker, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to move on. This will need to be your last question.
All right, thank you. TEXA has the power, under the mechanisms set up in the Act, by alerting the Department of Non-Compliance with the many things that must be met to be funded, to deny funding to universities that don't uphold free intellectual inquiry.
I know we don't have that power. We have nothing to do with the funding of higher education providers. What we have is the power to actually put conditions on registration or provide advice to the department if approached.
Quite right. The department says they would act on advice from you. So, University of Sydney have failed to provide any environment in which ideas can be exchanged. They've allowed violent students to shut down free speech. They've failed to keep well-behaved students safe from violent ones. They've billed well-behaved students for the cost of dealing with those who do. How much worse does the conduct of a university need to be before a referral to the department is made for funding to be revoked?
So one incident, Senator, an important incident.
One in a list of many.
But, well,
time doesn't permit us to go to them all.
Okay.
So how much worse does it need to be before a referral is made?
Well, you've already got my undertaking that I will go and inquire of the University of Sydney about matters, and will take appropriate action after that.
Thank you, Professor. I'm very grateful.
Senator Stoker?
Ask one clarifying question very quickly.
Very quickly.
Professor Saunders, do you think it's appropriate for universities to charge student groups security fees to organise events, to host events?
I think it's important for universities to have an appropriate way of assessing hazard and risk and danger, and, if necessary, being able to make a decision as to whether or not such an event should or shouldn't occur on campus. If people are concerned that there may be bodily injury, there may be sort of violence and those sorts of things, I think universities have a responsibility to take that into account. But I don't believe really that universities should be able to provide, I think, out of their own resources, general infrastructure to support the safety and security and well-being of staff and students.
Agreed. So that would be a no. It's not appropriate to charge students.
That would be a no. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Patterson.
Here's part of an earlier exchange between Stoker and Saunders about other aspects of the free speech issue.
Section 19-115 of the Higher Education Support Act requires a policy in relation to intellectual freedom. Table 2 of the 2017 Free Speech on Campus report that I have in front of me indicates that at the time it was prepared, of the 42 major universities in Australia, only 8 had a standalone policy dealing with freedom of intellectual inquiry. Are you aware of this report?
I am aware of this report.
I have a copy of that table. May I table it, Chair?
Yes.
What action has TEXA taken to deal with the fact that 42 universities required to have an intellectual freedom policy as a condition of their right to funding don't have one?
It's not about whether they've got a separate standalone policy. Many institutions include freedom of intellectual inquiry or indeed other ways of expression, freedom of speech in other sorts of policies. So it's not the matter of whether or not they have an explicit separate policy, it's whether or not their policies go to the point of freedom of intellectual inquiry or freedom of expression, etc. And I would be very surprised if there is not a university in this, if there is a university in this country that does not have somewhere in its policy suite a policy that goes to the point of free intellectual inquiry.
Is TEXA aware that several universities have policies in place that actively restrict freedom of speech on campus in a way that stifles intellectual freedom?
No, I'm not aware of that.
I'll give you some examples. The University of Queensland's Prevention of Discrimination and Harassment policy provides that it is regarded as an unacceptable behaviour, their language, for a person to use sarcasm. That's a policy that covers all staff and students. I can give you another example. Western Sydney University's Bullying Prevention Guidelines at Part E, sub 15, similarly deems sarcasm to be, quote, unacceptable behaviour. Monash University's social media policy says that students must not make any comment that offends. That's at Section 4. And that breach will mean students will face disciplinary action if they offend someone. CQU, Central Queensland University, has a student behavioural misconduct policy that provides at Section 6.1 that students are required to avoid any behaviour that could offend. It's on page 2. And that it could amount to misconduct on the part of a student, and that penalties could apply for doing so, including orders for them to compensate another person, among the other things that are possible. I could keep going, but lots of universities have policies that are quite problematic in terms of their restriction on the ability of students and staff to freely speak about many things. Knowing that now, because I mentioned it to you, will TEXA take action to investigate the kinds of restrictions in place on universities that are restricting freedom of speech?
So, I mean, I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but the instances that you've just pointed out do not sit comfortably with me. They certainly do not fit with the concept of a university being a place where ideas are contested and debated.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Where people are coming to learn how to think and without real concern about whether or not they're likely to be offended and the like. So yes, we certainly will look at that. As I say, we have a policy guidance which goes to some of those points. In other words, that whilst equity and diversity and civility and mutual respect and all those things are really important,
sure,
those things should not override a fundamental nature of a higher education institution, which, as I say, is about contesting ideas and the like. So yes, I will certainly take that back. We will certainly have a look at it. I mean, as you know, policies can, one policy can take a superior position to another. Many of these policies, I think, emerge from well-meaning action in terms of trying to right perceived wrongs or avoid unnecessary conflict, but certainly it would not be appropriate for Australia's higher education sector to be a place where really people were so careful that one should never offend anybody else.
You've made my day, Professor. Thank you very much.
The senator who interjected during Amanda's questioning regarding Bettina Arndt's protest was Labor Senator Louise Pratt. Here are some personal details about the senator taken from her Wikipedia entry. Louise Pratt has a son, born October 2014, whom she co-parents with her former partner, Aram Hosey, a trans man and LGBTI community activist, alongside Labor MLC Stephen Dawson and his partner, Dennis Littlelow, one of whom is the biological father. After Amanda's exchange with Saunders and a very good additional question from James Patterson, it was time for Louise Pratt to have a go at Bettina. She then grilled Saunders about why the universities aren't doing enough to tackle the rape crisis on our campuses.
Senator Pratt, you have the call.
Thank you very much. Is it appropriate for universities to foot the bill for things that might be academically spurious if someone wants to book a room on campus and do a tour of the country? is it reasonable that universities should have to foot the bill for those activities?
Well, it goes to the matter of freedom of speech and freedom of inquiry and freedom of expression.
Yes,
So
it does. But if the
Senator Pratt,
I understand. Professor Saunders has answered that part of the question.
Yes.
I'll perhaps give it some more context. If a university health department wanted to reject a tobacco company from coming in and using its hall that it would normally take a private booking for, because that tobacco company wanted to promote the health benefits of tobacco, should they be obliged to accept a booking on that basis? Surely when you go to what you're here to do, which is to uphold the quality of education and the quality of inquiry, not just every random idea that comes across a university's desk. I'm not saying censorship. I'm talking about the academic pedagogy here, where intellectual inquiry, where you look for evidence and ideas, and that is what you are supposed to uphold.
So I just draw attention to two documents. One is a statement that came out of the University of Chicago in 2014, which I think is gives a very, very good statement, very succinctly, about issues around responsibilities of staff, students, universities and freedom of expression. And the other is a recent speech given by Robert French at Charles Darwin University. Both documents are well worth reading and I think set out the issues very clearly. Now, in the Chicago statement, which generally supports freedom of expression and freedom of speech, it does go on to say, though, that does not, of course, mean that individuals may say whatever they wish, wherever they wish. The university may restrict expression that violates the law, falsely defames a specific individual, constitutes a genuine threat or harassment, unjustifiably invades substantial privacy or confidentiality, or is directly incompatible with the functioning of the university. In other words, the university may reasonably regulate time, place and manner of expression, and that would include, under certain circumstances, if the judge, as I've already said to Senator Stoker and Patterson, that at times would be to make a decision that it was unsafe to have this activity on campus, or it did not fit with genuine concerns about harassment or those sorts of things with the mission of the university, and actually not have the event stage. So there is no absolute compulsion to let everything go at the university. On the other hand, these are very important principles and they should not be lightly overridden.
I've now got some questions regarding the task force to address sexual assault on campus, and I would hope when it comes to matters of importance to students on campus, Senator Stoker might recognise the significance of this issue rather than to be upset about a fantasy problem.
We see the world very differently. Senator Pratt, please continue.